Well, just go a little backwards. We know each other, I think, for more than 10 years. And we talked about the war cycles for many years. And I said the cycle work I did and I do on wars starts at the Mandarin Empire 3,000 years before Jesus came into this world. And it only picks up, the long cycle only picks up the big wars. And I said wars like in Korea and in Iraq didn't even show up. So I said the big cycle is up, and that means it's a big war because the small ones don't even show up. So I'm very worried, and you have daily cycles on stock markets and weekly cycles and monthly cycles. The same is true for international battles. So if you look at the shorter term cycles, it can be a little bit calmer down, but next year looks very, very bad. Also, as you maybe remembered years ago, we said that the major problem is going to be the social unrest cycle in the United States, and that's exactly what you're getting. And I think both of them are connected. I think and as again, I speak as a Dutch citizen, so I don't have to be that politically correct because I don't vote anyway. But I think the Democrats always need to distract from what's going on. So they're very happy right now that there is a war because, as you said before, the oil price was already going down, the gas price was going down, and now they can say it's because of Putin, and it's not our fault, and we cannot do anything about it. And it's very messy. So it seems that there's some people who live in Washington, D.C., and they don't know what the outside world looks like and how the outside world functions. And I asked the senator that, do you think President Kennedy in the 60s was in his right state of mind, because he almost went in a world war with Khrushchev because they put some rockets in Cuba. And if that was the right thing to do, then why are you surprised that Putin says don't put any heavy material and rockets and whatever you have 100 miles from my border? But I asked that in a neutral way, but I never get an answer. Like I ask other things, I saw now that Biden goes to Buffalo, where 10 people were killed, and then I see in the news that every weekend or every week in Chicago, 60, 70, 80 people are killed, and that he doesn't go over there. So it's a very strange situation. They use everything for politics, and they are playing with fire because they have no idea how the world functions. And if they know how the world functions, they have to look at a person like Putin. And at least I would say bring in some psychologists to understand how to deal with a person like that, so we'll not explode, instead of calling him a war criminal and whatever. It just puts him in the corner, and that's very dangerous.
Explain what you see in the war cycle. You say the little wars like Korea, Vietnam, they don't even show up. But World War II and the Civil War, I guess, showed up. And these other big wars, Napoleonic wars, showed up. Right. So tell me about how big this war is to show up in your research that you think.
Well, first of all, if people want to take a look themselves, if you Google, you can find one interesting cycles, and it says it always starts to be dangerous in the second decade of a new century, which is now. That's why we said now in the second decade something can start to develop. If you go back 100 years, it was in 1918. There was a start of the First World War, which ended in Second World War. Before that, you had Napoleon. Before that, you had Habsburg problems. So if you Google major war around the year 1100, 1200, 1300, 14, 1500, you always see that in the second decade of a new century, big wars can start. Don't ask me why. It's the same mystery that we talked about, that in the stock market, when a year ends with a 7, then usually get a big down move. And that happens 95% of the time. Also, that one we don't know. We just have to live with the facts. As you know, I'm trained as a medical doctor, and if I would hear that the red pill is going to save your life, I don't know how it works. I will just give you the red pill. So the difference between an economist and a medical doctor is an economist first wants to understand the model, and a doctor doesn't care what the model says, but he just has to function. So what we always do is we want to know when something happens, and if a market goes up, what the price targets are. So we want to know when the war is starting and how many casualties there are going to be, and why that is going to develop in different ways, which we're not sure about. But for now, it's really going in that direction.
Well, tell me what your timeline is on when it's going to start and how big are the casualties going to be?
Well, there was a Jewish prophet, one of the bigger ones, who said, and you know, prophecies you don't understand, but only later you can understand it. And he said the last war is going to take 8 minutes, which nobody took serious because how can a war take 8 minutes? But now we have an idea why a war can take 8 minutes. Short term, it could calm down a little bit in the summer, but then next year it could continue in full force, and the situation is very, very dangerous.
When you say very dangerous, how big are the casualties you're talking about when this kind of thing in World War? In Russia alone, they lost 27 million people. There were just tens of millions died in World War II, and also counting in the South Pacific. So how big are the casualties that you're talking about here in the next huge war?
If it's very interesting, how do you calculate something like that? It's the same thing as calculated if you have a cycle in IBM. You know when IBM starts going down, and you have a calculation, which we have, what the upside price target is. So if you do the same on the war cycle, about 1/3 of the population is not going to survive in this world.
Let me get that again. Say that again. You're talking, what do we have, 7 billion plus people? You're talking...
Plus, while we're talking, we have more.
Yes. You're talking more than 2 billion people are going to perish.
It's yeah, the numbers say if you have a world war, it's going to take out one third of the population.
Woo! Boy, that's... now I know why you didn't want to talk about the next big war.
Right. But if you real estate, there will be some good things to pick up.
Well, yes, I know there's always a trade. I want to get back, before we move on, because I do want to talk about oil and gold and stocks and Twitter and a bunch of other stuff. I just want to stay on with another call you've made so many, and there. Listen, nobody is 100%, only God is omnipotent, but you've been pretty good. And you said that the one thing you worried about was civil unrest inside of America. And boy, now we have the Roe v. Wade that looks like it is going to be overturned. They've sworn to have violence, the radical left. Talk about the civil unrest you see coming in America. Is it going to calm down or is it going to intensify?
No, years ago we talked about the 60 year in social unrest. And it says, well, we had the 60s, and now 60 years later, we have the 20s, and it's only starting. What worries me is that, I mean, I'm still from the 60s, that at least people had a logical mind. You were allowed to speak up, and you were allowed to think. And today, you're not allowed to think. I'll give you one example. I asked somebody who's a lawyer, just, you know, I'd like to understand. I don't have an opinion about abortion, not abortion. I just, in my profession, like to understand how people reason. So I said, if I would kill a woman that is pregnant, then I'm being accused of 2 murders. But if we kill a child in the mother that's pregnant, we're not accused of anything. Can you explain it to me? And the funny thing is, people get upset, but it's a reasonable question, which you'd like to understand, and have other questions. Like, you know, the defunding of the police, which I find interesting coming from the Netherlands, who is suffering from this. Or what I say is, how it's possible that in Chicago, hundreds of people die every other week and you don't hear anything about it. And there are no answers. Nobody thinks anymore. And that was not in the 60s. In the 60s, we were philosophers. We had an idea of how the world should look like. We could discuss any question. But today, we just have to be quiet, and nobody has any legal and any logical explanation, and that worries me.
I think that Kennedy would be a middle-of-the-road Republican today. I mean, right? I mean, John F. Kennedy would be kind of a Republican. He cut taxes in, 62 or 63 because he knew the economy wouldn't take off. But you know more about the history than I do. I mean, you're just seeing the entire political sphere really go way hard. Communist, Marxist, Nazi left, I mean, right?
Yeah, well, like for instance, on the border, I have no opinion about the border, but if you save people who are almost drowning, why don't you send a boat over and bring them over by the thousands if you're going to save them anyway if they go to the river and they drown? Very, very logical questions, and I would like to know how Americans approach this question, but I never hear anything.
Yeah, you think so? You think that we will get much more civil unrest? Paint a picture for us. How does it look to you and your cycle work?
In a cycle work, it looks like a much more civil unrest. It's very scary. Let me put it that way. I don't want to scare people, but it's very scary, the cycles. But it's very hard to explain it to people. Like, for instance, you showed in your last program my cycles that were all topping the end of last year, and I said they look the same at least as in 2008. Now the first 4 or 5 months down is the biggest drop of the last 80 years. And we know that the GDP is getting weak. We know inflation is going through the roof, and it's still people who's going to buy stock. And I asked them why, and I still don't know. Not that I think they should not. Let me just make it clear. We covered all the shorts because our downside price targets on the S&P was 4,000, and we expect a bounce for the next 4, 5, 6 weeks before the whole thing tumbles down again. That's always how it goes. Then everybody will say, oh, it's over. But if you ask very simple questions, you don't get an answer. And then I watch the media that influence people, and they have the so-called pundits over there, and they says, well, I don't know. And then they always add, nobody knows. So you get the feeling that nobody knows, which is not correct. And I'm very afraid because maybe people saw this many years ago. It says, get out of bonds, especially bond funds. Now, there is a catastrophe going on in bonds. People lost, I don't know how much of the capital, and not going to get it back. And the same thing happens in stocks. And especially people who are going to be out of work or are too old to work, I don't know how they're going to survive.
So you think unemployment in your cycle work is going to go sky high?
Unemployment is going up.
Wow. That's other people have said the same thing. Unemployment is going to go up. Jim Rickards was on also, and this is a beautiful consensus. You are all smart people. Rickards and Armstrong and you and many other people are saying the economy is going to tank. So you're saying it's going to bounce this market for 4 or 5 weeks,
right,
and then it tanks. How low does it? You've said this before, and people are dumbfounded by it. You're clocking a 5,000 Dow is what you're saying, and
yes.
But tell me how bad in 4 or 5 weeks it's going to tank. How bad is it going to get? And explain how that's going to work in 4 or 5 weeks.
Well, I think we can go down to 15,000 because before we have another jump. But this long-term cycle is down for 2 years at least. So every bounce is just based on short covering, what they call the bear market rally. And this thing is not over yet. And I just, again, if I repeat, I wonder how people can advise to buy stocks when inflation is going very high and the GDP is going down and the world is going under. I find it amazing, but I had the same thing with the bonds. You remember, I said, get out of bonds, get out of bonds. The inflation is not going to stay 1%. And, if it goes up, you never get your money back. So a lot of people lost a lot of money, and now it's too late to sell. And soon we have the same thing with the stocks also, too late to sell.
And you're saying that the next target that you see is at 15,000. They're all going to say, well, bottom's in. And you're going to say, no.
Well, by that time, we speak again. We look at the cycles.
You think it'll go, I'm sorry, you think it'll go to, and I want to get this on record because, when you say this at the Dow at, I don't know, 40,000 or 35,000, where oh, come on. And now you look at all the stuff you're painting and you go, well, maybe he's right. You may go to 5. So tell me this 5,000 number that you got.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. On Bitcoin, when it was almost 70,000, we have a downside target of 25,000, and it missed it only by 300 points. It looked ridiculous. Oh, you remember the crude oil that I said is going to $3? How crazy that looked when crude was $70?
Yeah, you said just near term, just this year, you said crude's going to go way up, and it was, oh, come on, we have flush, we have great inventories, everything's cool. No, it's the trend is up high. You think oil is going to go much higher from here?
Yes, going higher.
Where?
But I just want to remind you, maybe remember, I thought it was in your program that said it goes, we talked about 2 years ago, it goes to $3.
It goes down to $3 a barrel?
No, we had that already. But
$3 a gallon.
And it did go to $3. No, it did. the crude price went from
Oh yes. Back in April 2020, it went to
Right.
went to zero. Yeah, you said it was going to go. Wait, that's another good call. But right now today, so we got another all-time high in gasoline. Somebody wrote me from Alaska, and they said, it was 457, 480, 479, and that was 554 in Alaska overnight. So another all-time high, one after another. Where is the price of gasoline going?
Gasoline, I don't follow. I can't follow everything, so I can't tell you.
Okay, crude oil. I mean, where's that? Well, how about diesel fuel? I guess you don't follow that either specifically. You don't. But crude oil, where's crude oil going?
Well, we have an upside target for now of 122. It is hanging around, but in a week or so, some short-term cycles are bottoming, and then it should continue up again.
Where do you, and now that you've got a fresh, point on your trend, which you called going up, you said it's going to go up. And congratulations on that. You said the market was going to go down. Congratulations on that. And the bonds, get out. They're at a low. Bonds are going to go up. No, thanks for that. Another good call. So where do you think oil is going to go from here?
Well, I said the 122 first, but I'm actually more worried about natural gas because the cycle is up for another 4 or 5 years.
Oh.
So who knows what's going to happen over there?
So how high will natural gas go before we get back to? Well, let's get your what's your target for crude first. So where do you think crude oil is going to go after that 122 and then back off? Where do you see it going in a year?
Well, I have to leave that open because I'm not totally updated. A long time ago, I looked and it says it can go to 150. It's probably still there. There's so much to do. So right now, I'm very much concentrating on the CPI and the GDP, which I find amazing because I seem to know better with my work than the Federal Reserve. They go, well, see in another month or 2 months how it's developing.
Oh, where do you think CPI, a consumer price index, where's the producer's price index clocked in at about, I think, 11% last week. Where is CPI going? The consumer price. Where's the inflation going?
It's going up into the summer, but then we see some weakness till the end of the year, and then it shoots up again. How
much will it go up between now and the end of the year? Where do you find the inflation rate? Where the government says it's 8.3% now. People like John Williams, who calculates the way it was calculated in 1980, says it's 17 or 18%. Where do you think inflation is going? Well, I have to use the data of the government, and based on the data, I had the target already of 12.5%. Wow, you think the government data will print 12.5%? The government data?
Yeah, I think so.
Holy cow! And where do you see it going after that? Are we going to get a hyperinflation?
Well, no, we're going to weaken a little bit for I think the rest of the year, and then we get again. The cycle is just bottoming. The cycle of interest rates and the cycle of inflation is up for the next 30 years. And we're going back at least to the situation of 1980.
So inflation cycle up for the next 30 years?
Correct.
Wow. Tell me where real estate is going.
Well, I have a lot of institutional real estate, and we're watching the stocks because in 2006, the stock came down 30–40%, and the housing market still did not collapse. But then a year later, it starts collapsing. So now, if you look at stocks are following like Nenner and Toll Brothers, they came down, 35% plus minus. So you have the same situation, and the insiders always sell first the stocks. The same thing is in gold and in crude oil. The insiders go in stocks, not in the commodities. So the housing market should follow. By the way, we have a cycle down on lumber, which means it's also not going to be going on too much. And I think it will be difficult to build a lot with the prices going up and people not paying that much anymore. So my advice is, if you can, take a profit if you have an investment in real estate. Now the question is, what do you do with your money? Well, there's no place to hide. The only places to hide is when the cycle on gold and silver bottoms, and that's coming pretty soon. And then that's where you can invest for the moment, because if you leave everything in cash, with the inflation, you lose money on your cash, but you still lose less money than being in bonds or in stocks.
Yeah, I want to take a fresh look at your gold cycle because if what you're saying is true, and I think it is, that we're going to have a cycle of what you say 30 years of cycle. So buying gold and silver and setting it and forgetting it is probably not a bad play if you don't want to trade. Am I wrong?
Well, forgetting it is not such a great idea always. I mean, if you put it in your mouth, then you can forget about it if you fix your teeth. But otherwise, you have to be on top of what's going on with the gold. The best thing is, like I say, is to look at our research, which, as you know, you get for 30 days free if you want to look how we do it.
Yeah, I'll put that. I'll put those links up.
And I just like for people to watch what we're saying. So because if I say it verbally, people might forget, might misunderstand. So I always like to read what I write down.
Okay, where's your price target now that it's been a couple of months before I've talked to you, maybe not even that long, but where do you think gold price is going? It's at 18, in mid 18s or low 18s. Silver is at 22 something an ounce on the official COMEX, price fixing organization. Where do you think gold and silver prices are going to go from here in terms of dollar amount?
Well, the daily cycle just turned up yesterday. So we're probably going to see a bounce. It can still go to 1750 plus minus. And as you know, still our upside price target is 2,500 as the first station. But again, to remind you, the cycles are up until 2027. So this is a long-term situation.
For gold, wait, let me get this straight. Cycles are up long-term for gold and silver to 2027.
Correct.
And where do you think it'll be at 2027 when it peaks out?
It has to, once it goes above 2,500, I can calculate that again. But I think, with so many years to go, we'll get above 2,500. Once we discussed that if they have to go back to the gold standard, then I calculate now gold should be around 40,000. I don't think it's going to happen, but let's keep it in the back of our minds.
Wait, did you say 14,000 or 40? 40,000?
40.
Oh. So you're saying, I'm not laughing at you. That's a big number, but we have big inflation. So you see it could hit 40. I want to make sure I get this right. Gold in the next 7 years, next 5 years could hit 40,000 an ounce.
No. If they go back to the gold standard.
Oh, if they go back, well, they may. Rickard says they'll have to. That's Jim Rickard says. So does Martin Armstrong, I believe, also says that.
And if you calculate that situation,
Rickard definitely does. I don't know.
Right now should be around 40,000.
If we go back to the gold standard, gold will be 40,000 an ounce.
Yeah.
Woo. I'm sorry. If you're watching this interview, I'm sorry. I hope you're having the same Charles Nenner is not wrong a lot. But if let's say you're off by 50%, let's just say you're off by 50%. Wow, you're talking 20,000 gold. If you're wrong by half.
Yeah. But usually the system works very good. You saw it with the stock market. We were in zero stocks, and we're still in zero stocks. And I still have to trust that everything functions the way it does for the last 30 years. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're stunning me here with some of your predictions. I mean, a third of the world population, $40,000 gold, more civil unrest. One of my friends does computer work, and I can't disclose who he does it for. He does data mining, and he says, one of the big things for the United States is going to be die-off from people protecting their property. And when he said that to me about 6 months ago, I was like, what? Protecting your property? Well, if you're right, and you're right a lot, then people are going to be, when this violence starts happening, people are going to start shooting. They're not going to take it. They're not going to let people walk through their neighborhood and burn their house down. Is that right?
Listen, till now, they let it happen. People just go in stores, steal everything, destruct it, and the police doesn't even show up. And actually, they don't do something. I don't know when the tide is going to change, but it is very strange that they can just do it without being punished. So I don't know how this is going to develop. I have no clue. Again, I'm politically neutral because I'm not an American. But if you bring in millions of people that come from South America, I always say we have the same problem in the Netherlands, where I come from, that people who are well established, had education, have a job, have a family, they don't run away. So mostly get people that are not very stable, and who knows where they're going. Nobody knows where they're going, and this country is totally quiet. So that could also be a very big problem.
Of the immigration with
Right.
yes. One of the guy, his name is Gonzalo Lira, says, listen, this Russia-Ukraine thing is just the beginning. We have a big drought in the western United States. Although they are getting some rain, actually flooding in like North Dakota, but that works against planting crops too wet. But anyway, he says listen, you're going to have big food crisis, and the CEO of Goya Foods is warning of big food crisis. What are you seeing in your work on the cycle for food shortages?
Well, I see that the price continue up, and the wheat is very difficult to export from Ukraine, which takes care of 50% of the world population, and it's going to be a big problem. So as you maybe remember, we had what they call the Arab Spring, and it started in Tunisia because the food prices were too high and people started to make a revolution. So in that part of the world, you can also start having revolution. And this is typically the war cycle. It's like a Dow Jones that comes down, first General Motors and IBM, then this one, and then the whole index comes down. So you got pockets left and right of social unrest and military revolutions until you get a big movement, and then you have a big war on your hands.
How high do you think wheat is? I think I saw it just most recently, and it could have changed because, it changes so much every day, and you mark this better than I do. And I know you do all kinds of commodities in your cycle work. Wheat was $12 and change a bushel. I got friends of mine in Missouri, and they were planting wheat when it was $5.25 a bushel, and that was a pretty high price. But now it's 12 something. It's more than way more than doubled. Where do you see wheat prices, corn prices, soy prices going?
I don't have that ready because usually we do not the very long outlook. We do it more for investments and for traders. So I don't have all these cycles are up for a longer period.
The price of food is up, is what you're saying. Just in general, food
yes.
up.
And now, being in danger that they will beat me up, the cycle of global warming is stopping. So I think everybody now is going to be on the wrong side of global warming because based on the cycle it's almost over. People are just making assumptions left and right, and nobody looks at the cycle of the last 500 years. That's a very regular cycle. We talked about the sunspot intensity and all these things. Nobody takes it into consideration. But they're going to be surprised that the global warming is almost over. So that has a total new situation for crops that they're not prepared to.
It'll be too cold.
Yeah, and nobody's prepared for that.
Wow. Okay. I wanted to get into, finally the election cycle. I wanted to get into that. I think with all the problems, no baby formula, they made a deal. They won't be ready to produce that for a couple of months. All the high fuel prices, diesel prices, truck part shortages, southern border being invaded, high crime, high fentanyl and drug use. That's because the border's wide open. 2022 election, November. I think the Democrats know it's so screwed up they're going to have to cheat like hell to win or start a war or something. They can't win even if they cheat. What do you think about the 2022 election cycle?
Now, let me give you an example that's interesting. And when Rome was burning, Rome in the time of the Caesars and so, the Senate was discussing if angels were masculine or feminine. Sounds very familiar, right?
Yeah.
And now the United States is burning, and the Senate, I think the Senate or whoever, is discussing about UFOs. So nobody seems to have a problem. It's the whole thing all over again. Now, if the Democrats win in November, I just like to talk to people and say, why would you vote for these people? I really don't get it. But again, I'm neutral. I'm not an American. I'm a Dutch citizen. I just don't understand it. And when I have very simple questions that you can ask in Europe, if you ask in the United States, then people get very upset. So I'm not asking those questions anymore.
Yeah, I know. I mean, if somebody, some guy claims he's a woman, you're supposed to pretend you believe him. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, right? I mean, evil is good and good is evil, and as Jesus predicted, another predictor, a good one. So, I mean, we're living in these bizarro world times. Finally, I would ask you, with all this news, what would you tell common citizens to do? I mean, canned food looks like a deal. I mean, right? I mean, whatever you can pay for it today, it's going to be more a year from now. Am I wrong? What would you tell people to do to prepare for what you see coming?
I'm sorry, there's not much you can do. The only thing you can do, and I really don't need it, is look at our research and make some money, and at least don't lose money. But in this inflationary environment where the GDP is going down, there's nowhere to hide, not even in real estate, like we discussed.
You think so? But could people kind of offset the blow by, buying cases of canned food and water and rice and
yeah, but how much can you buy if inflation goes up for the next 8, 7, 9, 10 years? So what can you do?
Well, preserve your capital, I guess. I mean,
yeah, but you cannot store food for so long.
Yeah. And that costs a lot of money too. You're talking about 8, 9, 10 years of food.
Yeah. But you have to know where the knowledgeable investors, where they invest in, and they.
So you can pay for it. You're not saying there's going to be no food. You're saying this food is going to be way expensive. Wow, just like the Bible predicted in Revelation.
Yes. What can you do? But I just want to finish with saying that the investors who know what's going on, they left the stock market, they left the bond market before. They're living now the real estate. They go in different assets, and until you figure out which asset that is, you only figure it out when the media pick it up, and then it's usually already 80% up. Then you're too late again. So the idea is to follow the what they call the clever money, and just go invest with the insiders, which usually is against the stream. You invest when nobody sees that's a good investment. So when we're getting close to gold and silver is never going to do anything anymore, then it's going to happen. But then everybody fell asleep and it's too late.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Wow, I don't know what to say. This is one of your best interviews ever, and you've had some good ones. You're a very smart guy. I just got to say that. I mean, you've made some huge calls here and elsewhere on your own, on your own pay subscription site too. But I know that calls you make because I've heard them or heard you say them. Do you think the Democrats are going to lose the House and Senate this year?
I tell you honestly, I don't understand the population anymore of the United States. So whatever I think is logic, it doesn't seem to work that way. So that's why I can tell you. If people are reasonable and rational, you can predict something. When everybody is totally irrational, you can't predict anything anymore. Wow.
You know what? That's a good comment, period. That everybody is unreasonable and irrational. Irrational, illogical.
So as long as I don't get an answer, why if you kill a mother who's pregnant, you're accused of 2 murders, and when the mother kills the pregnancy, she's not accused of even 1 murder. I can't understand that, and I don't have an opinion about abortion.
That's right, it's illogical. Do you see? A lot of people are predicting a big die-off, and they're seeing these insurance actuarials. And if you don't know it, you don't. And I'm not trying to trip you up because I didn't tell you I was going to ask you about this. And if you don't know, fine. But the insurance actuarials for 2020 were up 40%, or 2021 when the shots started. So the insurance actuarials are up. All deaths are up 40%. And now people are also seeing all deaths up just at the beginning part of this year. A lot of people are saying it's part of the clot shots, the injections, the whatever you want to call them, the vaccines, which don't stop COVID. Do you see a big die-off happening, a big sickness thing in any of your cycles?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, a lot of people we're having an unusual amount of people dying, according to insurance actuarials. Oh. And it's up 40%, I think, was from multiple insurance companies. And this leaked out earlier this year for 2021. It's up 40%. And so that's just no. And the only way you can explain it is, well, what happened? Well, the vaccines. Are you seeing a spike in sickness or die-offs in your work?
No, the pandemic cycle is almost over. It was 100% correlation, a 100-year cycle. Why nobody picks it up again? I have no clue. The big cycle before was in 1918, and then it was in 1718, the cholera, and in 1618. So it's almost over. So the pandemic is not going to be something that we have to really take into consideration at the moment.
So that's not going to factor in with the 2022 election. They're not going to be able to come out and say, "Hey, y'all, we got the pandemic again." You're saying no. They won't be able to make that case.
Well, they can say it, but it doesn't mean that it's realistic. They say a lot of things that I don't understand, that don't so some that I don't understand, but they think it's realistic. So I can't, it doesn't have to be. We don't live in a world where they look at what's realistic or not. We have some people now in the government who's going to tell us what's true, what's not true. So I tell everybody, why don't you read the book from 1984, where it was all predicted? First, you're not allowed to say whatever you want, and then every doctor knows if you're not allowed to say whatever you want, you're not allowed to think whatever you want. And then you still have the truth of the past. But if you break down all the statues and all the history of the past and you reinvent it, then nobody knows anything what's true and what's not true. So only true is what the government tells you is true, and we're almost there.
I'm not saying that because I don't like what you're saying. I'm saying that because my head is about ready to explode. What a great interview. Charles Nenner, the Charles Nenner Research Center, and he's right. If you do sign up for his for your research, and it's very detailed and very vast, you get a month for free. Is that right, or 2 weeks?
Yes, and a month, and please use the next bounce in the stock market to sell if you didn't sell yet.
Okay, and the bond market is toast. You're not going to see a 10-year Treasury at 1% again.
No, not in the next 100 years.
Well, Lord. Yep. And so the pensions, last thing, I'm sorry, a little false out. So the pensions are going to get hammered.
Well, what do you think about, in Holland, we have this big pension fund, and because of the politicians, they had to be 70% in bonds, and they got negative interest rates. So they're stuck with bonds that give negative interest rates, and they lost 25% of the capital already on the bonds. So the buying power of the population is going down. So it's a long-term mess.
And you think in the United States, anybody on a pension is going to they're going to get cut for sure?
For sure.
Wow. So let me get this straight. People on fixed income, on pensions, are going to have their pension cut because that's the math of the bond market. Am I right?
Right.
And then you're going to have massive inflation.
Right.